Good morning, Brad. Good morning, Ken. How are you? How are you guys doing?
Doing great.
Awesome.
Got in late last night.
Ooh, what time?
1.
Ooh, where were you?
Had to fly to Vegas for the day for meetings.
A day.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Like morning out, out there in the morning, back at night.
Oh man.
I don't like Vegas.
Football.
The less time, the
football
better.
question: Are they hyping the Raiders coming out there? Or?
Yeah, and actually, we were out there at the same time as a sports licensing convention, and they are going nuts over the Raiders.
Are the Golden Knights still huge out there?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's an interesting audience because, and we can cut this out if we want to, but you get those cities where if your team is playing that team, like Vegas is one of those places apparently where people are like, oh, we'll go out and see our team and hang out. So they get the best of both worlds out there with their sports teams.
Are they seem to be loyal fans, or are they like Philadelphia, or like?
I mean, how loyal can they be after just a year or two? Sorry, I'm a Preds fan.
Yeah, Chicago does that here. They come here because the tickets were cheaper.
Yeah.
And they'd come and party and hang out in Nashville and go see the Chicago play the Predators.
Yeah.
That's a great segue. Speaking of loyal fans, topic today is how do we solicit, value, and use client feedback, reviews. That's a topic that can be a real positive thing and something that you can use in your agency and your sales organization to really make yourselves better, to learn what's going on in the client's head, and better improve your creativity and service you deliver. But it can also be a very controversial thing, which we'll unpack today. Like how far do you let clients be in control of that type of feedback, and what's the reverse? Do you have mutual feedback for client relationships, so it's a level playing ground? So let's talk about that today a little bit. Do either one of you have a process for getting client feedback? Do you ask all the time, how are we doing? How are we doing? Or do you interview them at the end of a project?
Well, that's funny you ask me that question, because I'm a huge I listen to subtext. So when I talk to people, I look at their communication based on subtext more than I do what they're saying. So It's their tone of voice, it's their body language. They say that 80% of communication is body language. A lot of our clients, we're not face-to-face with them, and sometimes we're on the phone with them, and they're in other states, and so sometimes the body language doesn't exist when you're on call, so you're trying to listen to sentiment. And that can be misleading sometimes, because everyone brings in, when you talk to a client, they're bringing in a lot of other stresses on them that have nothing to do with you, but they kind of can take it out on you. And so the feedback loop, I think, is a really difficult thing, and we can unpack. I'll unpack a little bit more of what we've done that have been successful and unsuccessful, and to get that. And but I definitely feel that it's really a challenge. And I'd love to hear a little bit more with you, Ken, too.
Well, I've always had this question, and I want to ask you this because you know the traditional agency world well. You've been in it for a long time, right? I mean, you grew up in it, kind of.
Yeah.
And so
there was a time when there wasn't the internet.
right. So back when the internet,
I guess that's called traditional.
Ken doesn't remember that.
Yeah. You guys don't remember this, but if you're in the design, the audience might laugh at this, but I used to know how to spec type. I don't think even like your designers won't even know what that means.
That's coming back.
Anyways, that's how old I am.
Which is why I wanted to ask you. And so, the context for this, from my perspective, is again, we what we do is we work in a world where we help brands build direct consumer channels, and whether or not you're inside that world, like you look around and trust building elements are really big parts of how someone it influences a purchase decision, or it positively or negatively. And so when it comes to a service business, you kind of need the same elements, trust building elements, but they're a little bit different. And what I've always wondered is, and I could talk about how we do this and some of our philosophies here, but from an agency perspective, like me not coming from that world so much, it's always felt like there's been like this, you know, I don't know how to say it, like they're like treatment of royalty, like the client says royalty almost, where it's like, hey, we would never ask them to give us a review or a testimonial or something like that. You know, almost like
You're
it would
asking
be
them to do something for
disrespectful.
you.
Yeah, and as I dig into that, I'm like, I imagine that comes from this, maybe what I believe we try and not do is create an unhealthy relationship where, you know, there's an assumption that, you know, this is not a mutual relationship, but it's a relationship where, you know, the client says jump and we say how high and that kind of thing. So I don't know. I would love your perspective on that, Brad.
That's interesting because you're talking about client quotes and stuff. And, you know, what I find and throughout my career is that when I ask a client to give me a quote, number one, they don't even, without a lot of context, the first thing they ask me is, what do you want me to say about you? Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Like, or
they'll say, go ahead and write it, and then I'll look at it.
Exactly. So what we've done is we actually, and I know this sounds strange, but we actually write the quote, knowing that that's probably what they would probably say, but so that it's in line with how we want to use the quote. And I think everybody does this, and so I don't think this might sound disingenuous, and have them look at it and go, yeah, that's perfect. That's what I would say. Or they can tweak it if they want to, but they at least know the lane that we're trying to speak into. And that has seen the best. I've seen the best results for that, because I almost feel like, and I think you just mentioned, like, sometimes I feel like I'm giving my client an assignment to write something, though it should only take them 5 minutes. It's an assignment that I'm giving them, and it'd be easier for them if I just said, hey, would you say that about us? Yes. Would you approve that if we published that? Yes. Boom. Good. I'm done.
Yeah.
And, but it is kind of, you know, it's not direct. That's not feedback from me, from my client. Like, that's not my client really telling me hard things about our agency that would make me want to make some changes or something. And it's not, to me, that's not the feedback loop I'm looking for.
100%. Yeah.
So
there's different pieces.
Yeah,
of
from
this.
a quote, that's more of a promotional thing. But to really get client feedback has really been difficult for us. And we've even done stuff where we send out to our clients and to all of the stakeholders within our clients. So one client might have 5 or 6 stakeholders that we believe that we work with and we want feedback, and we'll send out a survey. What we find is that clients, like people, they don't return surveys. We even gave away like Amazon gift cards. Talk about incentives, and you could tell they just took advantage of it for the Amazon gift card. Like, you could just tell, and so it's like getting client feedback.
We're all
is so
susceptible to
tough.
it.
And so what you're doing is you're kind of like, what I'm trying to do all the time is trying to understand the temperature and the pulse of our clients. Like, understand what is important to them before they even say it to us. Like, I should know the pulse of our clients so that I know that if their numbers are not good, they're not going to be happy. And I should know that before I even have a conversation with them that something's not great, right? And I think, you know, transparency is tough. And you mentioned this, like, I'm a very empathetic type of person when I deal with my clients, and even my clients' customers, I'm empathetic. So, you know, a lot of times we will focus a lot of our attention on our client's customer, and be very empathetic to the customer in the way we're designing and building our marketing materials and stuff. But sometimes you do have to have empathy for your customer, and that's what I believe in. But at the same time, you don't want to be. It's a two-way street, and you want that mutual respect. And so, you know, and that's really what is hard to build, this mutual trust where they're giving back to the agency and giving feedback that is helpful. At the same time, you're giving to them something that's very helpful, and you have a transparency of when things are not working well. And you're able, like any good relationship with a spouse or with a friend or anything, you need to have communication that's open and transparent and real to really be effective. Because if it does become a one-way street where your client is becoming difficult, or they're treating the agency badly, or something like that, they're being mistreated, then it becomes harder to serve them, right?
Well, it's counterproductive to their goal.
Yeah.
I think the key thing that you said is relationship. And I do think that that's important, and it's not easy to build all the time. And sometimes people don't even want that. But what we try and educate, we have our internal values as a team, we go to great lengths to produce work that is quality and that is successful, and we're super high attention to detail and have a lot of integrity, and we expect those same things from our clients, not because it's arbitrary, but because those are things that we believe are important to getting to the result that they need. And I think that sometimes you might run into people that don't believe or even understand, or maybe don't want it to be that way, don't want a relationship, which I think is, I believe, the only way to get a great result out of a partnership is to have a good partnership, which comes from some sort of relationship. I'm not saying you have to be best friends or anything like that, but there has to be a mutual respect. And so I do think what you're saying, in my mind, the core of that is there has to be a relationship there, which then means, if there's a relationship, it's a balanced relationship. It's not, I'm your servant and you're my king.
Yeah. I always look at a relationship with a client is, I always go back to the Jerry Maguire quote, help me help you. You know what I mean? And sometimes you feel like your client isn't helping you. They're actually they're not an advocate for you. They're an adversary. And sometimes it can feel like that, right? And even your employees start feeling, there can be a sentiment that your client is the bad guy. It's like, no, we're serving this client, yet they feel like they're not happy, and they're never happy. You can't make them happy, and they're never going to be happy. And I think, those are the challenges that you face, and you have to go. And again, my experience has been, and I've dealt with this many times, is that there's people when maybe the first 6 months you work with them are really difficult, and they're like, you almost feel like you want to drop them as clients. Like, we should do another episode of when should you fire your client, but you almost feel like, okay, I don't know how much longer we can take this. Right. And what happens is you start to do things for them because you're still on it. You're still, doing very positive work for them. And all of a sudden something breaks where you start to make them look like superstars in their business internally. And they start to now switch. There's a switch that turns off, and it's like all of a sudden now they become more trustworthy of you, and all of a sudden they become a different person, and they're like, wow, you just were going through a tough spot, and we didn't even know we first started working with you, you were in that tough spot, but we helped you get over that tough spot, made you look like a superstar, and now you trust us, and all of a sudden their tone changes, the way they work with you changes. And so the question is like, how far are you willing to go? Like you said, if the client assumes that you're just going to serve them and that relationship's off balance, when do you get to the point where you kind of say, okay, enough's enough, and this client just really isn't a good fit for us, versus let's continue to show love, let's continue to work hard for this client, let's continue to help them in an empathetic way.
Yeah. Well, too many times in my past, I've erred on the side of, and this is human nature, but I'll tell you what I did wrong was that was in direct proportion to the amount of money that client was paying us. So I think the degree to which you will put up with difficult client many times is in direct proportion to the amount of money that they're paying you. So if they're a small to medium-sized client, it's easy to be like, I'm going to fire you and it's not worth the headache. If they're, 15, 20, 30% of your revenue for the year or more, you're going to be like, whoa. And what I've done wrong, and hopefully I've learned from it, is, if they're a high-paying client and they're some borderline abusive to your employees, it's easy to let that go. But what you've done is you've destroyed the relationship and trust of your employees.
and yourself.
And that's
Between
irreparable.
yourself.
Yes, yes. You've betrayed your own self. But that could be irreparable long term.
Betraying your own self. That's deep.
Yeah, we do it. I do it all the time.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
me too.
I mean, that is so true, and I would imagine that so many agencies, large and small, struggle with that idea. I mean, the more and more I talk to different service businesses and agency owners, it's rare that I talk to someone who works within or runs one that isn't dealing with someone that is almost abusive to them, and that makes their life hell, and that they're anxious all the time, and that they're not sure when they're going to get fired and have to leave. Who wants to live like that? I think one of the things that I have a strong passion about is I believe in, and this is sort of true for our company. Like, I believe in helping people. And I also believe sometimes that is not necessarily just putting up with people. And I think as an agency, you're a leader in a space. And whether you like it or not, you have the hard job of leading your client and your team, sometimes through times that are difficult. And there could be a lot of different types of difficult if you label that word or you define that word. But let's say that you are dealing with someone who is abusive, and we've dealt with people who are downright abusive to our people. We have a no bullying policy. We don't, we will not allow that to go on, because ultimately there's people on the other side of this thing. And so where I was going with this is, sometimes the way of serving, well, not even sometimes, I believe the way of serving everybody is by, in love, doing what they need done, which is, in the feedback loop, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not saying in communication and feedback, and it may have to escalate to a point where ultimately you can't work with that person. But I do think allowing it to just happen, it's a short-sighted idea, right? Because allowing it to happen may allow us to kind of work together and get paid for a little while, but ultimately, it doesn't work out in the business sense. It never does. And ultimately in the human sense, it hurts people constantly, and it hurts you, and you don't enjoy what you do, and your people don't enjoy what you do, and people don't respect you because you're not standing up for them, all these kind of things. And so, it's I think that can be a real, I imagine so many people struggle with that. And so anyway, we've learned a lot. I'll just give one tip for that that's worked for us is I'm extremely big in my personal life, in my business, and everywhere in working towards not making decisions based on fear. Fear-based decision making is the worst type of decision making. And so you have to be strategic about how do you put yourself and how do you help yourself as much as you humanly possibly can to get yourself to a place of strength in certain areas where you don't have to.
I need to hang out with you more so you can rub off on me a little bit, because honestly, I feel like, my whole life, and and everyone has their personal issues of how they deal with anxiety. And for me personally, the fear, I feel like it's my personality is that I'm always looking at the worst case scenario, not because I'm a negative person. In fact, I think I'm very optimistic about things.
I think you're very positive.
But I always look at what's the worst that could happen, and then from there I can go up. And then I can see what the best could happen. Right. And so that I can, because I'm a thinker, and I'm always thinking of, okay, if worst case scenario, what do I do? Best case scenario, medium case scenario, what do I do? And best case scenario, what do I do? And so that I can make quick decisions when something and pivot quickly. But I do find myself making decisions based on fear, and a fear of losing a client, fear of losing ability to support our payroll, fear to support my personal income, fear, everything's based on a fear. And I think there's a certain amount of fear that's healthy, but I feel like I've a lot of times live in the unhealthy part. And so I'm gonna have to hang out with you more.
I mean,
and I try to combat that. It's not, I'm very aware of it, and I do anything I possibly can to that I can feel like I can do at the time to get that out of there, whether it's exercise, whether it's meditating, whether it's praying, whether it's listening to podcasts to help me kind of understand it's going to be okay. Surrounding myself with people that are like, hey, you know what? It's not as bad as it's you're going to be good.
All the things you said, I mean, so I don't want to say that I don't make decisions based on fear now, but I've got such extreme awareness of it. And it's funny, all those things you mentioned, I was going to say, like, there is a formula and for helping yourself not do that. And it comes to conditioning, and being strategic about how do you condition yourself physically and mentally and spiritually and with support group and, in business health and all these things that allow you to start making decisions less out of fear because you're conditioned for it. Maybe not because you're completely, you're ultimately strong in that, but you're sort of conditioned for it. I just think it's an awareness. I would bet that most people aren't aware of it.
Yeah.
In real life and then in business.
And for me, this whole feedback loop with your client, that does bring a lot of anxiety for me. If I don't feel the pulse of my client, not only are we making a difference in the bottom line, which is number one for me, because I know if I can make a difference to the bottom line of our client, right? I tell this to my employees is that we are their financial advisors, right? And the first thing you ask when you meet with a new financial advisor is, what should I expect this year in my returns, right? And so the same thing with a client. We have to look at ourselves. Every dollar they spend, they're looking for a financial return on investment. Even if you're doing something that's branding, that's hard to attribute or something, they're still doing it for a return on investment.
Let me dig into that for a second, though.
Yeah.
Because like at the end of the day, though, right, there are people on the other side of that, and the people on the other side of that may not all have that one
same
goal
vision.
in
Yes.
mind.
So
meaning they work out, they have their own fears and they've got their own pains in their own life, right? And so then that's where it kind of gets.
So you're right. So the first thing that I look at as a priority is, are we actually making our clients money? Are we of value? Otherwise, we're not. If we're not of value, trust me, the CFO will eventually fire us. Even if the marketing director that we work directly with, that marketing director will be fired, and then we will be fired if we don't have other relationships or so of value. So for me, I look at that first. And second is, at that point, is our direct customer being taken care of? Are their needs being taken care of? Are things that's important to them being taken care of? Are we and that's where that's the struggle of the relationship, because now we're dealing with human and humans sometimes they don't work well together. And I think that's the biggest struggle, is the human struggle.
Sure.
And this feedback loop is always, it brings on anxiety for me, because we have clients, and the person that we're working with leaves, and we have a new director of marketing, and I don't have the rapport that I had for 5 years with the other one, or how many years, and so you don't know what they're going to do, and they can be really nice to you, but we all know that sometimes the nicest clients might not be looking out for your benefit.
Yeah.
And so for me, it always brings a sense of anxiety when I don't know.
Yeah.
That's what brings me anxiety. When I have no clarity,
Sure.
and I don't have a strong feeling, I start getting anxious.
And it's a catch-22 too, because the anxiety is you don't know, and you're trying to project your own thoughts into their head and say they must be feeling this, and you begin to create narratives.
Yep.
So, but the other side of the coin is to be willing to say, how are we doing? Rate us. Give us, what are we doing wrong? What are we doing? That can create a lot of anxiety depending on your personality type, because that can potentially hit your ego really hard, right?
Yeah.
So the trick is, what you're talking about is, as a company, am I going to live out of our ego, or am I going to live out of our soul? Because, the old saying is, a bad day for your ego is a really good day for your soul, right? So if I'm going to train myself to say, I'm going to ask them to be honest and transparent, even if it hurts. That's the key. But I think part of all of this, as we're saying, is this unknown. One of my favorite questions that I have, that I still use, you guys may have heard me say it, is one little sentence that I ask potential clients, current clients, always going into it, because you don't know what they consider successful. So my one question I always ask is, how would you, if you were to engage with us and you were to hire us, what would you consider success a year from now? We had worked together and you're sitting there. How would you define success? And 9 times out of 10, they will stop for a second and they'll say, that's a really good question. This is how I would define success. Yeah. Then you've got it. You know what their marker is, because you're coming in saying, for instance, we're going to increase their share of voice, their brand awareness, all of these markers, and they may be thinking over here, I don't really care how much brand awareness or impressions or market share you've got. I want XYZ, bottom line, hard dollars.
Also gives you the opportunity to address any unrealistic expectations.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you record that and you write it down, and I think that helps to eliminate some of the unknown. I know that that's kind of cliche and basic, but I think the anxiety that you sense and that we all sense, like it or not, it's really, that's our ego. We're operating out of our ego.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm going to get my feelings hurt. I'm going to let someone down. I'm going to let my employees down. And the ego can be very valuable in those areas, but we can't operate and live from there.
From a one-on-one perspective, working with a client, I find that it's the easiest way to get really honest feedback is to go out to lunch with a client or go out to drinks where they actually can relax and start to share their emotions and the real deep side. If we have like a quarterly review where a bunch of our teammates go into the office and it's office related and we sit down and we ask them questions like that, they're not as transparent as if you just get them in a real personal experience and an atmosphere that's not at work. They can start to share a little bit more of what's important to them. And I've always found that to be the most valuable thing if you can.
Brad's going all Don Draper on us.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm serious. It's like,
No, you're right.
It's like
you're absolutely right.
It's also taking them out of their environment, because we ask our clients sometimes these questions and you can tell they haven't really thought through them, and they're just like, they're not exposing themselves very much. They're just kind of like, well, yeah, like a financial return, and we want to see, but they're not. And some of them are more in depth than that, and they have real strong projections, and they'll sit down and go, okay, let me tell you what my quarterly looks like and what goals I'm personally trying to hit. They may unpack that for you, but a lot of them don't want to share that.
Or
with their agency. They don't want their agency to have a seat at the table. And I think that's also the challenge. Like, we have clients who are inviting us constantly to the seat at their table. Help us find this information. Help us come. And we have clients that say, you know what? We're not going to give you access to the deep information, or we're not going to tell you really what our internal goals are. You just do this for us, and and we'll see how it works out.
And the unique thing about agency life is that in other types of businesses, you're removed from that feedback at least 1 or 2 steps. So if I made coffee cups and I made really good coffee cups, I could say, how do you like our coffee cups and how are they functioning? If they say, oh, well, we don't like this, or we can improve this, maybe you made the lid a little bit higher and the hole on the top a little bit better, or whatever, I'm looking at something that's 1 step removed from me.
Yeah.
But as an agency, when you say, how are we doing? How is our creativity? How is our success? And then you're talking about, they're judging the human element of the service that you're offering. So that's the kind of interesting twist to this.
Here's another question that I've dealt with in my past. What if you're working directly, let's say, with a CMO or a director of marketing, right? That's your direct client. But then you also spend time with their CEO, who has a vision and a different vision, and they don't align up, right? But the CEO is driving the core business vision of the business, and the marketing director may just be a new hire within the last 3 or 4 months, and they have a different vision than what this other stakeholder has, a CEO that you've also worked with. What do you do? Like, how do you, especially if you're going to satisfy one, it's going to actually unsatisfy the other one. how do you get around that to the point where like you could service them both and really see their side of the story and try to get them to kind of interconnect a little bit to put in there. Maybe they're on opposite sides at some level, or
figure out how to make them both look good.
Yeah. And like, who do you serve? Like, do you serve your boss's boss when you have a rapport with them, or do you serve your direct, when I say your direct contact at your client? Like, and again, those are some of the challenges that I've in my past have dealt with and sometimes deal with. And
I think it goes back to one of the something I said earlier, which is like, I believe that as an agency owner, you don't realize the level of responsibility that you actually might have from a human side of things. But I actually think that in order to do that, right, you got to like somehow be the counselor and coach in the room to like actually get them to. We got to get to one sort of unified vision.
Yeah,
right.
And otherwise it's short-sighted. You're not going to win. They're not going to win. Yeah. No one's going to win.
And what I've seen
that's not easy.
What I've seen that is effective, at least for me, and it may just be my own style working, but I have this term I call "let's show them the beach," and that term, I think you probably know what that term is. Like when you drive for 8 hours going to the beach, and all of a sudden you come up and you're finally arrived and you see the beach, you get this euphoric feeling, right, of like, yes, that's it. And so it's this idea that if we can position, because I think a lot of people will say different things verbally, but when you show them what they both said, they both will agree when they actually see something that is more like visually aligned and more like, oh yeah, that's exactly what we said, even though you heard two different things. And so bringing them together at the beach sometime is coming in and just bringing together, being able to visually as well as represent what they've been saying somehow. Like, this is what your brand's going to look like. This is what it's going to do. This is how we're going to connect with your audience. This is how we're going to position you. And then allow them to say, no, that's not my vision. Or, yes, that's my vision. And have them both come together to kind of agree for the first time, maybe the vision, And so there's practical ways to do that. And again, I think all of that's kind of like that feedback loop. And I think if you can become part of that discussion and be the conduit, like you said, Ken, the conduit to bring those two together, you're bringing the peanut butter and the chocolate and you're making this awesome Reese's. And then, you know what I'm saying?
So let's talk a little bit about the value of client feedback. We talked about the hard parts of maybe going there, but do either of you guys have a process for getting that, or do you use certain tools? And if you do, how do you implement that feedback in productive ways within your organization? Who wants to go first?
We use a few different methods for that. I mean, I think, and we've sort of messed with them. Like, I think one method that we use often is a survey midway through that we try and do. We try and get someone to fill out and then discuss in person, because the thought is like, hey, and I would say philosophically, like, you really don't want, okay, so we may be taught to get feedback at the end of things because we, as human beings, generally when we interact with businesses,
right?
Yeah, we interact with a lot of businesses with short transactions, right? Like, so like I bought a thing online, or I bought a coffee, and so like at the, I got it, and then they say, how was it? But in a long-term engagement, I mean, let's just be honest, right? These are relationships that have ups and downs and that are trying to get to a unified goal. I don't, just one thing just on the point before is, I think it's unrealistic to believe that only one side can actually achieve reaching that goal, that side being the agency. And so I do believe we try and educate our clients like, hey, this is a partnership and you have a responsibility in this, because we aren't you and we can't be you, right? We can only do our best to help you get there, almost like the producer, and then we're the expert in certain areas, right? But it's a partnership. So it's a longer engagement, I'm imagining. Even it's longer than a transaction that you're gonna make online or at the coffee shop. So by the nature of that, like, we don't want feedback at the end.
Because you can't do anything.
Because you can't do anything about it. So I think as an agency, and we're constantly evolving this, because you want feedback, and then also, like, you need to have your metrics for success that are mutually agreed upon. but ultimately, like you can, again, let's be honest. Like we have only so much control over the whole thing, right? I can't control your happiness necessarily as a person. I can control our work product. And so what we try and do is like, like having feedback throughout, and addressing things that are indicators that, in a positive or negative way, right? I don't even talk about just negative, but like both positive and negative has to be addressed and should be appropriately, managed and dealt with. But I definitely think it needs to be, not at the end. Like if theoretically you can get the worst feedback in the world midway through, and and then you can adjust and actually fix that potentially.
It's funny because I've always struggled with getting these feedback forms filled out by clients, and it's amazing that you would think that they would want to give you feedback, but I almost feel like it's interruptive of, they're so busy and stressed that it's even hard. So like if you were to send some type of feedback survey midway through a project, what if you don't get it back? Like what if you feel like your client doesn't even value filling that out for you? Do you press hard into them and say, you need to fill this out? Or do you finally just say, you know what, you're just not going to be able to give us any feedback, and therefore we can't help you if there's an issue?
So like, if you think about,
because I struggle with that because I feel like sometimes I would have to push to the point where they're not receptive of it, to the point where like, I'm good. Like I don't need, I'm good. There's nothing wrong.
we try and it may not be. That's why I wonder if we don't only use surveys or anything like that, because I think the tools might get in the way sometimes with this stuff, because, when you use tools in mass market stuff, you're okay with like 1% of people not filling them out. But like when you're working with, a smaller amount of people, you need 100% of them to give you feedback. And so, you might start with, a survey question or something like that. But ultimately it's like, however you get it, you need to just get it. But I would say this, like, I think a lot of times people, every human's the same, right? Like we all do things, whether we like it or not. We're sort of ingrained to like protect, and do, we default into doing what we want to do, what we feel is best for ourselves. And so when you look at filling out a survey, it's like, oh man, that's like completely off my day. But if you can frame it in a way, because this is not dishonest, it's truly a benefit to them.
Yeah.
Right. It's just about framing it that way, because the feedback allows us to better adjust and serve. And maybe we realize that we don't have the same expectations or whatever that is.
Can I just interrupt you for a second? Talking about framing, and I think that is so important of how we ask. Because like you said, sometimes it can feel intrusive on our part, and it actually might be. I just used a service to sell a house, and it was one of these kind of list your own thing, for sale by owner thing. And we sold a house. It was something that we had for a long time down in Florida. And make a long story short, I knew it was coming. They were going to say, well, rate us. And I was thinking I'm going to give them but I was fascinated by that they took the time to put thought into the ask, and I think that's really key. I was going to read to you the way they positioned it. They said, the Google review is a powerful way for you to let the world know what you think of our team and company. This helps promote our unique business model, therefore is priceless to us. And I love how they started that. They didn't say,
so short and sweet too.
They didn't say, can you give us something for our benefit? It was, this is a powerful way for you to let the world know. In other words, you positioned it to say, this is going to benefit you. But really, they're asking for a review back.
Can you Slack that to me, please?
Yeah, absolutely.
I like those words.
Yeah.
That is really good.
So I think it's all in the ask too.
Yeah. We do things that are ingrained to do things that better benefit us. And so making it beneficial to them, I think, is important.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
One other way that we frame, I would just say this, like a tactic, not even a tactic, but like a strategy. So, we've talked about my business, what we do and why we do it, and that the why behind it is really important. As a side note, that why, that purpose allows you to, it also better helps the fear-based decision thing, because like when you feel like you've got a reason for why you exist, and I'm a Christian, and maybe not everybody is, but if you serve a higher purpose, it is a lot. You're in a much greater position of strength when you say, okay, this thing is not just like here to just generate some money. And so therefore, I don't have to be so scared about what happens to it, because it's there for a purpose, and it's fulfilling that purpose, and we're pursuing that purpose, and that purpose is valuable and beneficial to the world. And so anyway, off my soapbox for a second, but that helps on the fear-based side of things a lot, and on the strength side of things. But then when you come over to, we really discussed, we tried to figure out how can we, create really interesting media around. We work with some really cool brands, and I imagine all you guys do. I know you guys do. And so they're doing really cool things, and we're doing really cool things. And so like that content is interesting. And people are interested in how that works. And so what we started doing was we're like, hey, the kind of client video testimonial thing is like, it's a weird ask. It's usually disingenuine a little bit, not because there's any dishonesty.
Like my client quotes that they give me.
Yeah, right.
Quote, wink, wink.
Exactly. Wink, wink. But like, it's one of those things where
we don't use them very often, just so you know. We're not.
I mean, they're not going to have a lot of passion behind it. They may in some scenarios, but like, it's just hard to generate that kind of thing. And so we're trying to think, okay, how do we do that? And so one thing that we've done several times, where for certain specific brands is, we talk about our mantra is growing brands that matter. And so
like your shirt.
Like my shirt that I'm actually happen to be wearing today as well.
It's you guys can't see this there in the audience, but unless you're in the studio audience. But we, two of our three members here have Ken's shirt on.
Why don't you?
So
have
I'm an
today?
oddball, but I do have his shirt, and they're very nice quality.
Yes, you can.
Sorry, I didn't mean that.
You can get them at store.medicaid.com.
Yeah.
I didn't do that on purpose, but I'm wearing that shirt. But growing brands that matter is important. And I was going to say what we did was, it's in line with our story. We said, hey, what if we did we do like a video podcast style interview for certain brands, and we actually talk about like, it's more usually towards the maturity of the engagement, maybe at the end, but definitely at a maturity point where there's like a genuine respect and there's a genuine sort of relationship. We'll sit down with them and like, okay, look, we want to talk about why we believe. Well, first of all, we believe your brand is a brand that matters and it's important and it's doing something really cool for whatever reason. And let's sit down, and would you be willing to just discuss that? The purpose of it would be to help other people on the journey of that you're on. We've had Fortune 500, Fortune 50 companies sit down with us to talk about that when they've gone through, things that sound boring, like big technology transitions. But when you think about some of these things, those changes are mindset changes that actually help other people to kind of come along. We've done it with a few brands, and that's been kind of cool. You don't get everyone to do that. Not everyone's right for it, but that is one way that we found that, hey, you actually get a story, some really interesting content, and usually like a pretty good testimonial that's genuine out of it as well.
What's funny is because I find that the more the client, like, for instance, you're talking about maybe bringing out a client to engage with you, or even like for instance, if I brought out a client to be on this podcast, I guarantee you that client would be more of a cheerleader for our agency, because they can see our own personal struggles more and stuff like that. So I think if you can engage your client in that way, where they're even participating in podcasts or videos with you, I think there just builds that relationship and that trust, and they don't see you just as I'm spending X amount of dollars, I want X amount of return. They're seeing you as real people and that are really care about their brand and about them.
Well, we do have to remember that, right? Like, I know we're wandering around this sort of like general topic of feedback, but like in this industry, it seems more so than many others. It seems like people forget there are people on like the other side.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm going to interact with your business. Your business is going to give me this widget, and it's going to magically make this success happen and results happen. And if it doesn't, you know, and if it does, then great. If it doesn't, then this. And it's like there are actually people on the other side of these things.
Yeah.
And then I think also as an agency side, like you have to realize your clients, there are people on the other side, and those people have their own personal pains and struggles and challenges that then all that comes out in the business scenario in really weird ways.
One little piece of wisdom and psychology that I always try to remember, and it's really hard, that most people, the way they react and engage with the world is less about a reaction to what's going on externally, but usually a mirror to what's going on in their own internal life. So, you know, if you have a client that's really not happy with you and really always complaining and giving you negative reviews or being a problem client, you've got to step back, and instead of taking it personally, you have to realize, just like me, I don't react to external things. 9 times out of 10, I'm simply mirroring what's going on in my own psyche and whatever. So the fear, the anxiety that you have, like Ken said, you got to remember that the person on the other side that might be attacking your business or never happy or always abusive to your clients, there's a good chance that they're just mirroring what's going on inside of them. And to be able to like be present in the moment and think about that and help and try to decipher what's really going on when you do have negative feedback and say, how do I parse through this and say, I'm going to own this. I'm going to let my ego go, and we're going to own what we've done wrong. But at the same time, am I mature enough and wise enough to say, there's something else going on here and I can't take it personally. And those are the things that you have to navigate as a business owner and discuss those and process them with your team and say, okay, we've got some really negative feedback, but here's what I think is going on. We have to own this, but then here's some other stuff that maybe is not really what's going on with us. So, because it's easy to take it all on and feel guilty, and it can be overwhelming when you have 2 or 3 clients like that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's the nature of any dealing with any people, even employees, like when everyone has a bad day. Yeah. And some people have bad weeks, and some people have bad months, and some people haven't had bad years.
Some people just hate their jobs they're in.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I want to drill that home because I mean that's such a good point. And when you realize that, like, look, we say this all the time. Like, we can only, and I not only in our business, but I say this to my kids, and you know, as people, like, we can only control ourselves. You know, and that ultimately means that we decide as a business up front, like, what are we doing and going to do at an excellent level. We've got the marching orders to do this. We are agreed on that. We know we can do it well. We're going to do that extremely well. Now, that oftentimes hopefully aligns with happiness, but like that is not always directly in line with someone else's happiness. You can control what you do, but you can't control ultimately the other person's happiness.
Yeah. That's right.
You know, and more, I mean, people are extremely happy when you're doing things that you say you're going to do, and you do them at a high quality, and it's building their business. But every once in a while, that's not the case. And sometimes you don't realize that people have other things going on in their lives, and they have other personalities. And to your point, like, you know, probably I would say most people, especially like your team, they take that really personally. And I would say, like, maybe that doesn't mean that you haven't done something wrong, but if you can look back and, like, you know, this person may not be happy, and we have to address that, but like maybe there's something else going on in their lives.
Yeah.
And also it takes the pressure off of, I think it takes the anxiety of, like, and the fear and the egocentric side of it away, when you kind of realize that, you know, again, like, these are people, and they have great days and they have bad days.
Yeah. Yeah, like we all do for sure.
Yeah.
Do you guys have a process or do you regularly sit down with your team or your staff and go through these reviews, or if one pops up, positive or negative, do you sit down and process it? What do you guys do with that kind of feedback? Like, what's the value for you, for your whole team?
I mean, I think if we get feedback from a client, it depends on the type of feedback. If it's constructive feedback, then I think that's one thing we definitely want to do that. Or if it's feedback because we were all on a conference call with a client and he or she wasn't very nice. And there's one thing about talking about our client in a way that you're just belly aching, and there's another thing about constructively how do we help our business or their business in a way that this relationship is a little odd. And so I think it's just always try to be constructive with your team and not just do it as a way to like bellyache or try to, because it can create negative sentiment about your client in either way. One of the things that and I need to do this better with my team, but one of the things, even in our SLAs, our service agreements and stuff, that we have kind of like a bat phone. So like we say, this is how we will, how we will service you as a client, and you'll be assigned an account, somebody that's going to be the direct contact with you. But if you have any other issues, here's an email, and it's my email, and it's kind of like the bat phone. Like if you have any other issues that you can't solve, go ahead and feel free to email this, and somebody, can help you. Because sometimes what happens is the client's direct person who's dealing with them, they're just not clicking, and nobody's telling me that they're not clicking. But part of the frustration is the person they're dealing with, and they're in turn frustrated, and they don't know. And so normally it's amazing because we have a smaller firm, but it's amazing. I get calls every so often from my client, and I know when it's like I'm gonna have a heart-to-heart with them. Like they have something that they want to tell me because they're not getting done with my team. And I will even have like a CEO call me out of the blue that I don't deal with on a weekly basis, maybe every quarter, call me on my cell phone. I'm like, oh boy, what's going on? Because they're not calling me just because they want to chat with me, right? We just don't have that kind of relationship.
I think anxiety wells up.
Well, so I get on the phone with them, and like good CEOs, they're very nice, but they're very clear.
Right.
This is what's going on, and this needs to change. Or they're not happy about something that we're doing, or they're trying to sometimes convince you to do something differently or whatever, right? But so I feel like every agency has a bat phone, but I think it's okay to tell your clients, hey, use this. If there's a time where you just feel like you're not getting your voice heard, I'll listen to your voice and I'll try to take action on it because I care enough about you. And so just having that extra thing so that clients never feel like, okay, my direct account supervisor is the top. That's as far as I can go. We all do this. We get on the phone with like AT&T or some other big company, and the first thing you do is like, can I speak to your manager? And like, no, I don't. Nope. You almost feel like they want to stop you there. Like, no, there's nothing my manager can do. Or if you say, can I speak to your manager? They're like, they're almost offended by that. But everyone's trying to find somebody above them that can actually listen to them and hear their voice and say, this is what is concerning me, or this is what's important to me. The person I'm dealing with right now doesn't see that. And I think a lot of that has to do with experience too. I noticed the more experience I've get in life, you start to read things about clients that are all subtext. And we talked about this on another podcast, that sometimes your staff doesn't see kind of what's the obvious, but the only reason I may see something different is because I've dealt with it over and over in my career, and I think you said it's playing out again.
Right.
And I've been there before. I've seen this before, and this is really what's going on. And your rest of your staff looks at you like, really? I'm like, well, maybe not, but yes.
Right.
I think this is what's going on. And so sometimes it is trying to figure out and trying to read your customers, but I just think as much as who's listening, as much as you can create this sense of this way that they can communicate. And again, like us, right? We only want to communicate things when we're kind of ticked off or we're feeling like we're not getting what we want.
I was just gonna say,
we only want to complain. We don't.
I was gonna say you
say,
don't call Comcast when like the game is working and it's on, and the internet's so fast.
I know, my internet's at a gig a second.
Thank you.
Yes, you know it's funny though because we do have a client and it's a great feeling. It's an awesome feeling. We go into their offices and literally we'll have their CEO pop in and he just pops in out of the blue and he is so like positive, like you guys are doing an awesome job. You guys are loving everything. Like he's so emphatic about it. And there's a couple, and we get another guy that's in the same company. He's one of their main sales guys. He's like, yeah, you guys are killing it. And even if we're not killing it, they're still saying we're killing it.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm like, it just feels good to see that because normally people don't do that. And so, you know, what I would say is if you can take anything from this is to give people props.
Yeah.
Even if they're doing what you expect, just what you expect, still give them props. Give them, man, you're doing a great job. Because what it does is it empowers them to do even a better job.
Right.
And it's always this thing is I have such a problem because I'm a critical person. So sometimes I feel like being critical to somebody will actually help them be better. But the reality is it doesn't.
Right.
We have the exact same experiences on some of those things, and it feels so good. We get the opportunity, just like I'm sure it's definitely you guys and everyone listening has this opportunity to really help someone in a difficult situation win or relieve a pain, or we change somebody's business or life or whatever. And you can tell when that sort of just genuine thankfulness, gratefulness towards what you did comes out, and it feels so good. It feeds you. It's funny because like it's almost more. When people give you unsolicited, extremely positive feedback, it way outweighs anything negative because, like I said, like when you have negative feedback, people are calling Comcast all day long. But no one calls in when it's positive. But if it must be really good if they're calling in and it's positive feedback to someone like Comcast. But like for us, like that happens and that feels so good. And I would say like it speaks to though, and if anyone is running any organization out there, especially one that manages outside companies, like even our business has outside vendors, and so your team is all the people that are part of it to get to the goal, including the agencies and the outside vendors. And human psychology is such that like you need to understand that as a leader, the way you motivate someone is not by only beating them down. Like that doesn't help you get to where you want to be. And so it just behooves you as a client or anyone who manages any team, including agencies and outside vendors, to don't hold back your frustrations and negative feedback, but balance it in a way that gets you to your goal, which is like in order to motivate someone, you need to give them positive feedback and tell them when they're doing really, really great, do more of this, and then there's also the, hey, do less of this, or this was okay, but this could be done better. If you do a quick search online for how to motivate people, how to get people to do things, and how to increase what they do, you'll find that that's the way you do it.
Right.
And so it's interesting because it's actually, you need to have both sides of it.
You mentioned one word, which I think if I were to take anything from this podcast is gratefulness. And this idea that, and that's what we want from our clients, right? We want them to feel grateful for working with us, not because but every human being needs that, right? But it's such a positive thing. And I think sometimes even us business owners and running or anybody that helps run an agency is focusing on gratefulness can just really help you in any sense. And again, showing this when your clients give you gratefulness, even when you kind of don't deserve it.
Think about when your clients give you gratefulness, how much more are you willing to go above and beyond?
Exactly.
If I often say like, man, if they just knew that the way to motivate people was not to be rude, but to actually just feed, hey, you did this so awesome. Could you do it again? be like, yeah, we could do that again, like for free even, you know.
And the key, I think the key to that
But the key,
is being genuine. Like
Yes.
the key is being genuine. Like, you know, when someone's praising you just to try to motivate
100%.
you. You know, it's like, hey, Bob, you're doing a great job. And after about 20 times of that, it loses its meaning, right? It's like, look for opportunities to be genuine, to really be human and engaged and empathetic with, you know, your team member or even your client. Like, I find that it's really helpful to compliment and model that with the client. So rather than trying to get them to do that to you, do it to them. You know, like like Brad says, spend time with them and compliment them and say, hey, you know, I really respect how you're handling this position, the way you guys are doing this. You're doing a really good job on this area. I think as you model that back and mirror it back to them, it comes back. So that's certainly something that I've seen not only work, but be a genuine relationship builder between clients.
100%.
Guys, we're running out of time here. Thank you so much.
good.
Any parting words on this whole idea of client feedback?
I would say that this conversation has ignited me to really, even as I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, man, we just got to put a little bit more energy into this. And I think it's so important because I think, again, remember we talked about, I think it was last podcast about clarity, me having clarity and in the business. And I think that offers me clarity. The more feedback I get from the clients, the more I understand their sentiment, how they feel about us, if we're doing things that are valuable for them, the more clarity I get. And so I would say that I'm going to put some more energy into that. And I'm actually going to have my employees listen to this podcast more because I think there's some great topics that we talked about that we've been talking about internally as well. So
It's awesome.
Saves you from having rights,
yeah,
procedures,
just
and
here
things.
listen to this. No, they do listen to it, and you know, it's funny. It's fun to hear your employees hear other people talk about what I've been talking about, or a different perspective of what we've been talking about internally. So a lot of what we talk about here is things that we're all personally dealing with or talking about with our staff and things. So it's always fun.
That's awesome. Good. All right, guys. Well, thank you. Until next time. Bye-bye.
See ya.
Bye.